Hi, it's ChickenboneJohn here, and I want to talk about guitar scale length and how the frets work. I decided to do this because somebody who did a workshop with me the other day brought a guitar, and there were a few problems in terms of where the string scale was and the fret spacing and the position of the bridge. So I just wanted to talk some basics which I sort of take for granted because I've learned them, and it's easy not to pick this up straight away. So we'll just do a few basic things. The length of the string, the bit that is vibrating, is called the scale length, and that's measured from the nut at this point and the saddle here, in each case we've got a bolt, and we measure from the center of that bolt because the string is riding over the crown or the center of the bolt. I'll talk about other conditions later. So that's the scale length. In this case, and it's probably easier if I use a tape measure rather than a steel rule, but that's 25.5 inches. That's a conventional length that Leo Fender used on his guitars, and it's commonly used today, 648 millimeters. Now, the one thing you'll notice, the gap between the nut and the fret, and then consequently each fret diminishes. It goes up the fretboard. It's a mathematical constant, and I know people who are making cigar box guitars say there are no rules, but this is a sort of physical law. To work out what your fret spacing is, historically it was done on what was called the rule of 18. The idea was you measured your string, divided that by 18, and that gave you that distance. And then to work out the rest, you would take the remaining string length, divide by 18, and you get that spacing. Take that, divide by 18, and repeat. That's not quite accurate. The 17.82, I think, is the correct one. So what that means is a few other mathematical things which always happen. This is set out on a Western scale. So each of these divisions, that's a semitone, half a tone. And in Western music, we regard that as the smallest note that we can hear. It results in the conventional scale, and that goes, you see, that's a tone, that's a semitone. So it goes tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. That's the do, re, mi. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 notes, counting the first note as one. 8 notes, and in Latin that comes out as octave. So that's your octave. The curiosity or interesting thing is the octave is always halfway down the string, exactly. So if you go for 25.5 inch, you can see it's going to be 12 3/4. I'm doing this with a tape. It's a bit easier to read than if I use a steel rule. So that's fixed. The other couple of curiosities are the 7th fret, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, is a third of the way down the string, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a quarter way down the string. These are fixed mathematical points. The reason for that is based in physics. When you pluck a string, it vibrates between that point and that point. If you put a harmonic on it, just touch it and pluck it, it's going to be vibrating around that point. So you've got half that distance. That's called a node on the string, where the whole string can vibrate, but then you get this harmonic where it's vibrating around that point. So the other point is down here, third way along, and you can still do the same harmonic. The note, the string is split into 3 parts. So there's a bit of a wave there, bit of a wave there, bit of a wave there, third the way along it. And the same with the 5th. It's going a quarter. I say that's a sort of physical phenomenon. There are other harmonies, but they're the main ones and the mains I want to reference, because, as I say, it's got you this interesting point that that's a quarter way, that's a third of the way. So yeah, that's a quarter of the way, that's a third of the way, that's a half the way. So this is always going to diminish. Occasionally we get guitars and somebody set out this distance wrongly. Either this is quite a lot too short, which I saw on an example the other day, but I have seen other examples where this is way too long. Or people use this scale but then position the bridge either too close or too far away. These intervals will only work for that given distance. That is a law of physics. So when you just eyeball something, you should always see this reducing. If you've got a fret space that suddenly gets bigger or much smaller than that progression, you know something's wrong. To avoid that, we always set out our fretboards using this sort of thing, a scale rule. And can you see here where it starts at the 0 fret, and you can see all the way up these positions line up with my frets. So that's the way we get it accurate, using one of those when we cut our slots. Just a couple of examples here. Now, this one here, this fretboard's been just slotted to take an ordinary bone nut. So what we would do, we would cut off that portion and our nut goes in there. The string starts from that point, the face of the nut. Now, if I line those up, if I line these fretboards up, you should be able to see that when we slot it to take a bolt for the strings to ride over, or a machine screw, that's bang in the middle, which is as it should be, because when we put the bolt in there, the machine screw, the strings are going to ride over the crown, the center of that bolt. So that's a subtle difference. Your guitar won't play perfectly in tune. You know, if you'd slotted it like that and then put a bone nut, that's going to be a little bit short. You might not be able to detect it. Some people can't. But I have seen some guitars done wildly different. People do get obsessive about fret spacing. Some people have argued with me that this isn't accurate enough because the bone nut is going to be too far forward by half the width of that saw cut. That saw cut is 23 thousandths of an inch, so they think that is about 12 thousandths of an inch, 100th of an inch out, and they think that will set it so it won't play in tune, which is nonsense. This you can't hear that, you can't detect it. In other musical theories, in say Persian music, Arabic music, they don't necessarily work on these intervals. You get things like quarter notes where the note would be played here, and sometimes you will see instead of having metal frets, they're actually tied on with gut, like on a Turkish saz, or if you look at an Indian sitar, They have arched metal frets, but they're tied on and you can adjust them. But for Western music, this is the convention. So I hope that's some help. Just to recap, this distance here from the top nut to the saddle, the sounding part of the string is the scale length. And to set out a conventional Western scale with semitones, you can't tinker about with that. If you set your frets and then thinking, oh, the box isn't big enough, I'll pull the bridge forward, it won't work. It will not play in tune. Likewise, if you set your bridge too far back without adjusting the fret positions, it will not play in tune, because it's down to the mathematics of that distance being divided by the modern accurate equivalent of that rule of 18. And then you'll find that this always gives you your octave at the 12th, the seventh fret a third of the way along, and the 5th fret a quarter of the way along. Just one little thing, we're talking about that theoretical length. Excuse me. One thing which happens when you press a string down like that, it bends the string ever so slightly, which will increase the tension and increase the pitch ever so slightly. That's why the bridge is sometimes moved back just a few millimeters, so that as the pitch rises when you fret it, that actually should get it to play in tune. It's really all a bit of a compromise. It's not perfect. Some strings react differently, so quite often you'll see the bridge slanted a bit more on the bass side. That's the great thing about a floating bridge like this, which is not glued down. It's held purely by the pressure of the strings. You can easily adjust it. Okay, hope that's been of some help. Bye for now.